You're about to enter a world that looks familiar, but it really isn't. A world where truth bends under the weight of belief, and where whispers on a screen can grow teeth in the mind of a stranger. In this world, a man hears the hidden language of conspiracy, broadcast in fragments, disguised as revelation. He follows those signals not to enlightenment, but into the trees of Bohemian Grove, where reality and imagination quietly trade places. What happens next is not fiction and asks unsettling questions here on Things Visible and Invisible. Tea Krulos is an American journalist and non-fiction author. He is known for writing immersive, investigative books that explore fringe subcultures, conspiracy movements, paranormal communities, and unconventional belief systems. He is the author of several non-fiction books, including American Madness, The Story of the Phantom Patriot, and How Conspiracy Theories Hijacked American Consciousness. And he joins me down the line from his home in Wisconsin. T, welcome to Things Visible and Invisible.
Thanks so much for having me.
T, I think before we get into the substance of your book, which is absolutely fascinating, I have to say, and a story I wasn't aware of, let's look at the bigger picture. Do you think that conspiracy theories are harmless fun or dangerous?
My opinion on that has changed quite a bit. When I first started on this book, which was 2010, I thought it was kind of harmless fun. But now I see it as a terrible epidemic that has ruined many people's lives and is still a huge problem today. Even if you look at our leadership here in America, they frequently weaponize conspiracy theories to try to sway popular opinion. So it's not only a threat, but it's a very mainstream, visible threat.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that sets it up very nicely. I think we better start at the beginning, and let's name the protagonist of your book, who we are going to follow through his very strange journey into the world of conspiracy theories and what that meant for him. So, who are we talking about? Where was he born, and where did he come from?
Yes. So Richard McCaslin is the name of a man that I met and got to know over a period of about 8 years. And I actually quite liked Richard. I didn't agree with any of his ideas, but I was very fascinated as to where those ideas came from and why he believed them. So I listened. I think this was the greatest part of this story is I listened to him and his ideas, and no one else really wanted to, but I was very interested. Richard was born in Zanesville, Ohio. That's about as small town America as you can imagine. He was a Marine, so he was enlisted in the armed service here, and he was a comic book fan. He was somewhat obsessed with comic books, and he wanted to be a comic book superhero himself. And he did eventually. He adopted his own superhero persona, the Phantom Patriot, and he was arrested on January 20th, 2002, because he raided a place called the Bohemian Grove, dressed as his superhero persona, the Phantom Patriot. He had an armed standoff with the police and was arrested and spent about 6 years in prison before he was released. And I met him shortly after his release from prison.
Well, that's a very interesting oversight of what we're going to dig into, I guess.
Yeah.
I think he was born in the mid-'60s, isn't that correct?
Yes. I forget the year, but it was mid-1960s. So he's about 10 years older than I am.
Yeah, I think it was 66 because I looked before we came on air. But Because comic books, you probably don't remember, T, but comic books in the 70s were what kids read, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
all kids, I mean, both sides of the Atlantic. I read as many American comics as I did anything else. And we didn't have the internet. Television was very limited in some ways. We didn't even have video,
Yeah.
believe it or not. And all the wonderful world of social media was a science fiction fantasy. So comic books were very much the thing which, I guess, fertilized our imagination for good or ill. Now,
Yes.
I'm sure you've done some research into the kind of comic book world that Richard immersed himself in, because there were kind of subgenres. Was there a particular strand of comic book that he felt drawn to, which would later resurface in his own comic book incarnation?
Yes. So he was a really big fan of two characters in particular, Batman and Captain America.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see the influence of both of those characters into his own superhero persona. And he loved comic books. His parents kind of thought that they were trashy, I guess. So they weren't keen to support his hobby, but he would sneak read them in the, we would call them a drugstore or a convenience store, where they'd have a rack of comic books, and he would stand there and read them as quickly as he could, before his parents saw him. And his father, he had a very troubled relationship with his father, but they went to church every Sunday, and he was quite bored. So his father would give him scrap paper and a pencil, and he would sit there and draw and design his own superhero characters. So I think, it was such a huge part of his life, and it was an escapism, because his father, unfortunately, was also abusive to him and his mother. And I think he really dived into this fantasy world of comic book superheroes. And that was a big part of his personality.
Yep. So, what was he like at school? Was he an average student, a good student, a loner, somebody who got on well with others?
He was somewhat of a loner. He said that he was kind of a nerdy kid, so he identified with like Peter Parker, Spider-Man, as being sort of this nerdy high school kid. He says that he adopted his father's temperament. So he was being picked on, but then his anger kind of came out, and he beat up these kids that were making fun of him. So, I think he really struggled with his identity a lot throughout school and for the rest of his life.
Now, he left college or high school and went into the Marines straight away.
Yes, his father kind of gave him an ultimatum. He was like, "You're turning 18, you need to move out of the house." Well, what 18-year-old has the skills to do that? A lot of them will turn to enlisting in the military, because you get, free lodging and food, and you've got some money you can put towards college if you want to. So yeah, he moved out of the house and joined the military when he was 18.
And how did the Marines work out for him?
He kind of viewed it as superhero training. He's like, I can learn combat and weapons, and this will help me become a superhero. But he admitted to me that he found it to be actually pretty boring, because most of his military career was spent guarding a military base in Florida. And so it was a lot of sitting around, not a lot of action.
He would have been too late for Vietnam, I guess, and
Yes.
too early.
This was, late 80s, early 90s. There's not really, this was a little bit before the Gulf Wars had started.
Yeah. So he had a relative, but it's interesting that this theme of the superhero persisted in the Marine Corps. Was this? Was this something which? We can understand it maybe in an adolescent boy or a pre-adolescent boy getting very interested in comic books. Was it unusual, would you say, for his age and social background to be still immersed in the world of comic books?
Yes, definitely. especially at that time. I think nowadays, you have these big comic conventions and cosplaying is kind of popular with adults. But at that time, it really wasn't. So it was seen as unusual. I ended up talking to a lot of people who knew Richard, which was great to get their perspective. So I actually talked to one of his army buddies who shared a bunk with him. And he said his memory of Richard was that he had this huge comic book collection next to his bunk, which was very unusual for the military, and that his mother frequently sent him home-baked cookies, which everyone in the bunk really enjoyed. But yeah, that was his main memory was the cookies and the comic books.
I mean, the picture you're painting, T, I don't know if it's deliberate, is somebody who's not quite fully grown up,
Yeah.
and I would have thought the Marine Corps would have kind of, the cliche of take the boy and make him into a man type thing. Was this
Yeah.
just not working with Richard?
I don't think so. I think, he was so deep into the comic book world that really stuck with him more than anything.
I mean, it also speaks something about his kind of personality, his mental strength, or maybe his mental one-dimensional nature of it, that he was very focused on something, even though the world around him was probably
Yeah.
trying to make him into a good Marine. He was still fixated, if you like, on this world of comic books, superheroes, and seeing himself as somehow a superhero in training.
And he really took the comic books so seriously. He didn't just like the art, but he really enjoyed the ethos of the comic book. He was it taught him a lot about how he viewed the world as being very black and white, good and bad, good versus evil. I think that became a very big part of his personality.
Would you say as well, because I mean, I'm of a similar vintage and I remember all those comic books, and you're absolutely right. The world was the good and the bad, and there was not much in between. But there was also a sort of resorting to violence very, very quickly, if in the name of goodness, justice, apple pie, and all the rest of it. Do you think this was also something which was part of his kind of personality, that he viewed the world in these very stark terms, but that he also viewed the resolution of conflict in a particularly direct way?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because in the comic books, they don't really care. The superheroes don't care about the law. They care about good and bad. So the solution is to punch a bad guy or to defeat the bad guy. It's not to take them to court and have a lengthy trial or something like that. So yeah, I mean, it's so strange because I met him about 4 times in person, and I didn't get the sense that he was a violent person, but he was capable of it. I mean, he was arrested and had 5 felonies, including arson and brandishing a weapon to a police officer. So that was inside of him too. But it's so strange when you meet someone in person because I didn't sense that was his personality.
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose we could have a whole show on what it's like to meet real people and what the games that people play. But I'm interested in what you said there, T, about which triggered a memory I have of comic books, which you're absolutely right. The Batman universe, the Captain America universe, what people term the Marvel universe today, for example, it is just that. It's its own sort of self-contained world where the superheroes are the arbitrators of right, wrong, justice, and the delivery of justice. Was that something as well which he had imbued? I mean, did he see himself as somebody who was able to discern what is right, what is wrong, and also maybe mete out the justice required?
Yeah, and I think it's key to point out, probably, the comic books that you're remembering in the 60s and 70s, the storytelling was a little more simpler. There wasn't these nuanced stories that you might see in something like Watchmen or comics like that. It was very much like the good guys win, they beat up the bad guys. That's the story.
That's the
They
story.
didn't like dive deeper into the human psyche about how to tell these stories. So I think, he was very much influenced by that particular style of comic book story. The good guy wins, he gets a girl at the end, and life is great. So, I think that was very much how he viewed the world.
So before we start to get into the next decade, is leaving the Marines and the whole conspiracy, what was his take? I'm just curious myself. What was his take? Because the next decade in the 90s, you're absolutely right, comic books took a decided turn to a more psychological, a darker. We had, as you say, The Watchmen. We had The Dark Knight Rises.
Right, more complex stories.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What was his view that this was a sort of betrayal of what he understood to be comic books, or did he quite enjoy this new diversion?
I think that he had more of a connection to the older style, but he enjoyed all comic books. He actually, and this was very funny to talk to this person. He eventually ended up living near Las Vegas in a desert town called Pahrump. But he made the hour-long drive from Pahrump to Las Vegas every Wednesday because that was new comic book day at the comic book store. And I talked to the owner of that comic book store, and he didn't know anything about Richard's past life other than he was a very loyal customer that came in every Wednesday, and he had a long list of comics that he would read every week. So he was a huge comic book fan for his entire life, even up until the end. That was like the highlight of his week was Wednesday, new
Amazing.
comic book day.
Well, before we get into that sphere of his life, let's just take it through chronologically if we can, T. So what year did he leave the Marines?
So that was the 80s, late 1980s. He left the Marines and he went to a stunt person school in California. He saw an ad for a stunt person school called Kahana's stunt school. Kim Kahana was a very interesting character. He was actually the stunt double for Charles Bronson, and had starred in many action films. So he ran this kind of fly-by-night stunt school that was very low tech, and he would drive a car down the road in his school, and the stunt people would have to jump off the car, and they did these kind of crazy stunts. He was hoping that he would be an action star, but he didn't really have the social skills to connect to the industry. So he kind of drifted along, in his early 20s. But he eventually found a pretty good job, which was he got to portray Batman at Six Flags amusement park, Batman stunt show. So he would appear during the show as Batman. He was up on a tower and he would glide down a support cable and kind of fly over the audience. And then he'd land on his feet and beat up the Riddler and Two-Face. The stunt show was kind of based around Batman Forever had just come out.
Yes.
So he had this stunt school kind of paid off because he had this really fun job that he worked at for 3 years.
And presumably that was right up his street, as we would say.
I mean, this was his childhood idol. So, I mean, of course he was thrilled to portray Batman. Absolutely. I mean, who wouldn't? It's the most fun job I can think of, probably.
So why did he only stay 3 years?
Yes. So this is where the story takes a really bad turn. He was an only child. He, as I mentioned, had a very troubled relationship with his father, but I think he loved him despite that. And his mother and his father died pretty close together in a period of about a year. So he's lost both of his parents. He has no siblings. He has very few friends. And he asked his job if he could have some time off to go back home to Ohio to visit his father, who was dying. And they said sure, but they actually fired him. So he had lost his parents, his job, his friendships weren't working out. He had a creative project he was very excited about, but kind of fell apart. So he went through a really tough year, you know? And I think his mental state was really vulnerable. So he's kind of stewing about all of this. And he happened to be living in Austin. He was working at Six Flags amusement park in Texas. So he's living in Austin. He turns on the TV, and there's a character named Alex Jones who is presenting a documentary about a place called the Bohemian Grove. And he takes Alex Jones' word very literally about this and decides that his mission in life is that he's going to bust up this place, the Bohemian Grove.
Okay.
That's his new direction in life.
Okay, just before we get into that, T, I think for somebody who may be watching this, we better just explain. I know who Alex Jones is. You know who he is.
Yes.
But let's just put him in the context. He has a certain reputation today. He has a certain fame, thanks mainly to social media. But we're talking maybe, 30 years ago approximately?
Yeah, so this documentary was produced by Alex Jones in 2000, the year 2000, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah, about 26 years ago.
Okay, so early.
And this is early Alex Jones. And this is before he was not really known outside of Austin, Texas. He had a radio show there. He did stuff on cable access, which if people aren't familiar, cable access is pretty much anyone who wants to produce their own TV show can, if you have a camera, pretty much. So, you know, he was on the air, but not well known outside of Austin. He went on to become probably the most famous conspiracy theorist of all time. President Trump, shortly after he had announced his candidacy, appeared on Infowars in an interview with Alex Jones. They used to like each other. They don't anymore, apparently. But he's well known, especially for, there was a terrible mass shooting, which is sadly all too frequent here in America. And he had propagated this theory that the Sandy Hook elementary school shooting was a hoax, and that the parents who were grieving that you saw on TV were actually actors. And he got sued to the tune of about $1 billion for these claims. So I would say he's probably most well known for that. He recently lost his website, Infowars. It was bought by a satirical newspaper called The Onion.
Yeah.
They're now the owners of Infowars.
So,
which is, I have to say, some sort of karma.
So when Richard encounters Alex Jones would have been operating via radio shows. He was a sort of shock jock in that sort of world, American talk radio. Cable television, I presume, in its early stages. Probably some internet footprint of some sort, a website or such like.
He had the good sense. He was actually, he has some shrewd decision-making ability. So he was actually online very early. He saw that this was the direction that things were going. So Infowars was online almost immediately when the internet became sort of commonplace in the late 90s. So he started to develop a following outside of Austin, mostly because of the internet. And, he really knew how to grow that feature of Infowars. And it took off. It developed a big following.
And talk to me about we know today what his subject matter is, but back then, at the turn of the century, what were the kind of themes, the recurring themes, the kind of ideas that he was propagating?
I think that, he first made a name for himself a little bit because people say that he predicted 9/11, right? Which is a major turning point, uh, I would say, in American society, and especially with conspiracy minded people. Richard told me that, he had kind of been into the conspiracy stuff, but didn't take it too seriously at first. But after 9/11 happened, that changed him. He now wanted to be a commando, a warrior that was going to fight against this terrible conspiracy that was plotted by our own government, is what a lot of 9/11 truthers, is what they're called, say. So Alex Jones was really part of the vanguard on that. They say that he had predicted that 9/11 was going to happen because he mentioned something about Osama bin Laden wanting to target America. And so he got a lot of clout for that. A lot of people were like, this guy is onto something. He knows what's up. He's a rebel that knows this insider information. And so his following really blossomed a lot after 9/11.
And in your research and understanding of Richard, put together the two pieces of this jigsaw that we're putting together here at Tea, which is that we've got this man obsessed with books and comic book heroes and the whole mentality and ethos. He's been imbibing it since childhood. And then he comes across the likes of Alex Jones with his theories and 9/11 and all that flowed from that. How do these two sort of merge into a coherent thought for Richard?
So he saw this documentary, and it wasn't overnight. He was very disturbed by this documentary that Alex Jones had made. It's called Dark Secrets Inside the Bohemian Grove. And again, this added to Alex Jones' clout quite a bit because he and a producer snuck into this place. It's a campsite, and it's a club that very wealthy, powerful men are a part of.
Yes.
So Alex Jones had managed to sneak through the woods into this place. His assistant had a camera hidden in a duffel bag, and they secretly recorded the inside of this place, including they have a somewhat bizarre ritual called the Cremation of Care. And it's this sort of mock ceremony that takes place in front of a giant statue of an owl. It's kind of spooky, weird, And but he interpreted all this to be that these powerful men are having a secret satanic ritual in the woods. Who knows? Maybe they're sacrificing children there. And Richard was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And he was like, there's no way I'm going to let this happen. I'm going in there. I'm going to dress as a superhero. If I have to shoot everyone I see in there, I will, and I'm going to save these poor children. A lot of conspiracy theories kind of revolve around children are in danger by these evil, powerful men. And you can see why that conspiracy would resonate with people. I mean, the Epstein files are a real thing, right? So, it's something people will get very passionate about trying to save children. And that's who Richard was. I think, he thought he was going to be doing a good thing and helping people. But he was just very misguided by this misinformation from Alex Jones.
Now, there's a great leap, T, between buying into a conspiracy theory of whatever hue and really thinking it's correct or believable, such as the Bohemian Grove ideas that Alex Jones was propagating. But to do what Richard did and to take it to another level, which is to turn yourself into a superhero, to weaponize yourself and to head off there to right or wrong, is this just sort of, and I don't mean this disrespectfully to the protagonist of your book, but was it a sort of elaborate kind of almost cosplay of what he thought a superhero should be doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he had been so immersed in comic books. He really wanted that to be his true story. He wanted to be the hero. He thought in his mind he was going to go into this place, the Bohemian Grove, and he was going to save these children, and he would expose this terrible secret that America has had for 150 plus years happening in the redwood forest. And he thought he was going to get a lot of positive attention for doing this, and that he was going to become sort of a superstar. He did always kind of want some level of fame, I think. He had wanted to be an action movie actor. He wanted to be a superhero. And he just had this vision in his mind that this was all going to work out. And of course, it didn't at all. It wasn't reality.
Okay, well,
And I don't think he could really handle that, because instead of being like, oops, I made a mistake, he kind of went deeper into conspiracy and tried to find reasons why his mission didn't work. It wasn't his fault. It was the fact that, this huge conspiracy was working against him.
Of course.
And yeah.
So take us in some detail then through this moment. So what year are we talking roughly when he decides that Bohemian Grove is his mission?
Yeah. So 9/11 happened, and that really was the deciding factor that he was going to do this. But he didn't do it immediately. He actually put a lot of thought into, he puts somewhat, I don't think he thought about reality, but he thought about the mission. And so it took him about a year, and then in January 2002 is when he made his move on the Bohemian Grove.
So just remind us which state Bohemian Grove is in.
Yes, it's in Northern California. It's a campground located deep in the redwood forest.
And I'm assuming, T, given the people that attended, there would be quite a lot of security around it of one sort or another.
So a lot of important people are members of this club. January was a very unusual choice for him to raid this place, because the majority of people are there in July, actually, summertime.
Right.
So they do have year-round staff that maintain the property. So he rolled up and he thought he was going to see a big group of powerful men wearing druid robes and sacrificing children. But in reality, there was a groundskeeper and a security person. Right. It was just those two people. They were quite surprised to see a man wearing a skull mask and a costume, heavily armed, walking through the campground.
Just for our benefit, T, I think, is that picture behind you of the...
Yes.
So that just gives
people
an idea of his sort of costume. How would you describe it? I mean, what was he sort of riffing on in terms of other comic book heroes?
He was a very big fan of a key comic book artist named Steve Ditko. Steve Ditko designed Spider-Man, and he did quite a bit of work for Marvel Comics in the 1960s. So you can kind of see the influence of that character in his costume design.
Yes.
It's actually pretty simple but effective. He has a blue jumpsuit. There's a kind of frightening Halloween store skull mask. He has a bandana tied around his head. On each shoulder, there is a donkey and an elephant that are crossed out because he equally hated the Democratic and Republican parties. For his entire life. He thought they were two sides of the same coin. And, I don't completely disagree with him there. And he had a lot of weapons. He had a semi-automatic rifle, a pistol, a ninja sword, a crossbow, a smoke bomb launcher, and, a dagger. So he was ready to go when he went in.
And he went fully dressed, did he? He turned up at Bohemian Grove in the costume. So
Yes.
he was completely, as we would say today, in the zone of being a superhero.
Yeah. Yes.
So, so as you say,
And it was a very frightening experience for everyone who encountered him.
I was going to say, so he turns up and it's out of season. The gamekeeper and the security guard are probably having a quiet time post Christmas.
Yes.
And suddenly a very, very well armed superhero turns up. I mean, what's the? Do they think it's a prank, or are they actually quite worried about this man?
I think that they immediately noticed the weapons, and they were like, "Whoever this guy is, he's dangerous." So they called the police immediately, of course, and they showed up relatively quickly. And Northern California, it's not like Los Angeles. It's pretty quiet. So I don't think that the responding officers ever had a day in their career quite like this. They were frightened. Richard says that they were visibly frightened, as I would be too. If you show up and there's a guy wearing this costume that's heavily armed, I don't know how I would respond to that. So, they had a very tense standoff. And I will say at that time, Richard admitted he was kind of suicidal. So I think that he was hoping that they would kill him. But then he had a moment where he was like, I don't want to die. I'm going to surrender. So he, put down his weapon, put his hands up. They arrested him. And that was there's a lot of moments in Richard's life where I'm like, things could have gone slightly different and this would be a much different story. What if he had never seen Alex Jones? What if he had been shot? The story would have ended there.
What was the law enforcement, the legal attitude to him? Was he seen as somebody who was maybe mentally ill, a fantasist, or somebody who was a danger who had to be given the full force of the law?
Excuse me. I don't know how they didn't know how to react. They arrested him after the standoff. The next thing, he says he was kept in a padded room, which they would reserve for someone that maybe has a mental illness. So he spent a couple days in there, and his next visitor was the Secret Service. They went to the jail and interrogated him for quite a long time because at that time, George W. Bush was the president, and he was also a member of the Bohemian Club. So this is a place where the president visited in the summer. So they wanted to know everything about this guy. And, it's really hard to tell sometimes what part of the story is actual conspiracy, because Richard believed that he was being spied on for the rest of his life. And I'm like, that could quite possibly be true, because they're interested in you. You had an armed raid into a place where a lot of powerful men, including the president of the United States, like to hang out. So yeah, I would think that they are going to keep tabs on you. They want to know where you're going, what you're doing. So he had a certain level of paranoia, but I don't think that all of it was untrue.
Mm-hmm. Well, but just pausing Richard's story there for a moment, because isn't that a facet of so many people that are involved in the world of conspiracies of whatever sort? There are, in every conspiracy, there is always some element of truth that people can find.
Yeah.
But the real, and I don't know what in researching, Richard, your thoughts on this, T, but it's really around the interpretation of whatever facts are available, as opposed to building your own further facts around them.
Oh, sure. In my book, I make it a point to give some examples of things that probably sounded like crazy conspiracies, but ended up being true. The government here had a program called MK Ultra, in which they tried to develop mind control drugs. So they dosed people who didn't even know they were being drugged with hallucinogenics. And they did a lot of terrible terrible things. So conspiracies exist. And like you say, oftentimes a conspiracy theory will have some grain of truth to it. It's just people kind of take that grain of truth and then they embellish it and they run wild with it, and suddenly it has something to do with reptilian aliens and all sorts of kind of unbelievable stuff. But there are several times where Richard was talking to me about conspiracies, and I was like, I don't think you're 100% wrong. I think you're maybe 50% wrong on this.
And he was able to accept that, was he?
I mean, we argued a little bit about some of the stuff, but for the most part, I just kind of listened. I didn't want to. I was like, it's really a fool's errand to try to argue against this person's belief, because their belief is so strong. There's nothing that you're going to be able to say to change your mind.
Yeah.
So I was like, I better just listen to what he has to say.
Now, before we get on to the aftermath of this, one thing that struck me in your describing the life of Richard to this point is, other than his parents, he doesn't seem to have any real friends, girlfriends. Is he somebody who, I mean, was this a deliberate sort of choice, or was it something how he just ended up? Or was he one of those people that was sort of increasingly a loner as he got older?
He had a lot of trouble connecting to people. And I have to say, I found it to be very sad. I kept hoping, I knew him for about 8 years. And during this time, there was a couple times where it looked like maybe he was going to make some new friends. And he had such trouble connecting to other people because of his kind of wild conspiracy beliefs. He was very suspicious of other people. He was paranoid. So he had one friend that he met in stunt school named Lon. Lon is a great guy. He does not believe in conspiracies like Richard does, but he kind of recognized that Richard was kind of a lonely guy that was having trouble connecting to people. So he was a very stand-up guy. He helped him out when he was in prison. He was able to get him things that he needed to make his stay in prison more comfortable, and he stayed in touch with him. And I really appreciate that about Lon. But yeah, he had very bad luck romantically. I think, again, this kind of goes back to his comic book thinking, but he thought that if he was a superhero, maybe he would land himself a nice girlfriend like Mary Jane in the Spider-Man comics or something. But he didn't know how to do that. I think he had a really stunted, his maturing was very stunted. And so he had this kind of comic view of women, and he attempted to get a girlfriend, but he did not have success.
No.
And I don't know. I wish he could have learned that in his life. I think he would have maybe not fallen into this conspiracy trap if he was able to develop some healthy relationships.
Okay, well, let's return to his arrest. He's now sort of entered into the real world of conspiracies. I mean, with the Secret Service interrogating him, law enforcement interested in him. People probably suggesting, is he part of a conspiracy? I mean, he's actually become sort of what he had fantasized about. What was the reaction of the authorities? Was he tried? Did he plead guilty to anything, or did he have to go to trial?
He went to trial. He pleaded not guilty, but the jury, it was a jury trial, and they found him guilty on all counts.
What were the charges, T?
What?
What were the charges? Was it attempted murder or?
So he got 5 felonies, which is the most severe crime you can get here. And the 2 ones that were pretty major, and this actually was very detrimental to his life later on, because he was very honest. So when he was applying for a job, there's usually a question, have you ever been convicted of a felony? And he, instead of lying, would say, yes, I have been convicted of 5 felonies, including arson, because he set the part of the Bohemian Grove on fire. He snuck into a building and set it on fire. Brandishing a weapon to a police officer is a pretty big felony. And then he had 3 kind of more minor felonies. One was he had a billy club, is a stick that police have that you can hit someone with, and that's a felony in California. So he got a felony for that, and trespassing, and I think there was one more kind of minor felony. But yeah, 5 felonies is a pretty heavy rap sheet to have. So he was not able to find a job after he got out of prison. He was somewhat fortunate in that his parents, when they passed away, had left him a pretty healthy inheritance. He had almost $1 million they had left him. So, he had money, but he had no direction in life, and he had nobody. So that money was, I think, pretty much worthless.
Yeah. So he was convicted, I guess, by the jury. What was his jail term?
He had been sentenced to, I believe it was 10 or 12 years of prison. But after he had served about 6.5 years, a court had found that the judge had actually over-sentenced him.
Right.
And that he should not have been sentenced to 10 to 12 years. And so they let him out on parole after about 6.5 years. He had a pretty intense moment while on parole because while in prison, he had drawn his own comic book. And this comic book tells his story from his perspective. It's very interesting. The art is kind of weird, and but it's not. He was not a liar. So if you take the comic and match it up to court documents, you see that the story adds up, but it's just told through his lens. So he drew this comic while in prison. As you point out, he's probably the first vigilante to draw their own comic book while in prison. And he made some copies of this and was handing it out to people. He handed a copy to his parole officer. I guess he thought maybe he could win the parole officer over to his way of thinking. But inside the comic, there's a photo of himself in his costume with a weapon, which you can see on the book cover.
Yeah.
And the parole officer didn't know that picture had been taken previous to his jail time. So they raided his apartment, and they completely ripped the place apart. They took the door off of the oven. They searched every inch of his apartment because they thought he was had a weapon, and he didn't. So, the comic book is very fascinating. At that time, he was very heavily into Christianity. So the comic is loaded with different quotes from the Bible. It's funny because he got into the teachings of David Icke.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And he liked his work so much that he abandoned Christianity entirely.
Right.
And became non-religious. And that's also when he very much got into reading about the theories of reptilian aliens.
Right.
So, being in prison didn't change his mind at all. In fact, he went deeper into the conspiracy rabbit hole.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, T, the conspiracy against us in terms of time is fast drawing in.
Yeah.
I have one last question, really.
Yeah.
And it's this, because you've set it out very, very interesting. People are going to go and have to read your book to get the full gist of this story. But the more I was looking at this, the more I was thinking around it, I'm almost coming to the conclusion that the world of comic books were as insidious for Richard as the conspiracy theories. Or am I reading too much into it?
No, I think that you're absolutely right. It gave him a moral frame, but an unrealistic one.
Yeah.
The world is not a comic book.
Yeah.
We might like to think that the world works that way, but in truth, I don't think people are really good or evil. They're somewhere in between. So that's what I don't think he understood.
No. Okay.
That, these guys at the Bohemian Grove, they might be rich, powerful people, but they're just people.
Absolutely.
They're not reptilian aliens. They're not Satanists.
For now, T, tell people where they can find out more about you, your work, and where they can pick up a copy of your fascinating book about Richard McCaslin.
Yes, American Madness was published by Feral House. It got adapted into a documentary, which just premiered at the LA Film Festival a couple months ago. So it's currently being submitted to other film fests. We are hoping it might find a distributor so people can watch it, online somewhere. But if you go to my website, teakrulos.com, there's information about all my books, including American Madness.
T, thank you so much for coming on Things Visible and Invisible.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Things Visible and Invisible. We're dedicated to uncovering phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality, from ancient enigmas and paranormal encounters to scientific anomalies and forgotten histories. If you enjoyed this journey into the mysterious and unexplained, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell to stay updated on future explorations. Have a personal experience or story that aligns with our investigations? We'd love to hear from you. Visit our website at tvi.show and reach out through our contact form. While we can't feature every submission, we review them all, and your story might be featured in an upcoming episode. To support our continued investigations, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter or channel member. Your contributions make these explorations possible and give you access to exclusive content, early releases, and monthly behind-the-scenes discussions with our team. Don't forget to check out our merch store. We've got everything from TVI-branded t-shirts and hoodies to stickers and coffee mugs, perfect for showing your support while keeping the mysteries close. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time as we continue to explore the things visible and invisible.